So when we left off yesterday, remember that the Sioux Uprising had been crushed, right? And then white Minnesotans wanted revenge. So it was in that context, that local context of, wanting revenge against the savages, that the military arrested thousands of Santee Sioux. And many of them then had to be given military trials. And this raises the question of, what are Indians' civil rights? You may remember when we started and we were talking about the Constitution, I mentioned a couple times that Indians were outside the society. Remember when we talked about the 3/5 clause and who counted in the population? Indians didn't count at all. And so there was this sense all through that period that the rights that applied to anybody in America didn't apply to Indians because they were outside the society. But where now were the Santee Sioux when this happened?
They're in America.
How do we know that? Where were they? What's this place called? They were on a reservation. Controlled by who? Controlled by the federal government, right? So clearly it seems now under the jurisdiction of the United States. So we would think, I would think, that the civil rights that apply to anybody in the country should now apply to them. Okay, so they get military trials. Many of those trials lasted less than 15 minutes, start to finish. It was clear that in many of those trials, they didn't know the real names of the people they were finding guilty. All of this was just in a frenzy for revenge. Yeah.
So they weren't like 15 minutes because like the women's trials where they didn't get to talk, it was because the military didn't know their names?
No, so these are separate things.
Okay.
So a trial that's 15 minutes, one way or the other, is a trial that's unfair, right? So but then separately, they didn't even know the names of the people that they were prosecuting and finding guilty. 303 Santee Sioux were sentenced to execution, sentenced to death. That was the largest mass execution sentence in all of American history. Never before or since have anything close to that number of people been sentenced to death altogether.
How much was it here?
That's the 303. Hundreds and hundreds more were sent away to prisons. Is there anything that could then happen to save them? So they've been convicted in a federal court. Anybody know who could save them? The president. Right. The president has the power to pardon anybody who's convicted in a federal court. But would you expect the president to do that? I wouldn't either. But he did. Abraham Lincoln was the president in 1862, and Lincoln believed that a serious travesty had occurred. Lincoln saw it as the kind of revenge-motivated conviction that it was. And so Lincoln reviewed each of the cases one by one. Now remember, what was Lincoln much more busy with at this point? The Civil War. But here he is, sitting in the White House, going through the cases one by one. And Lincoln spared all but 39 of them. So he pardoned or commuted the sentences of all but 39 of those 303 who had first been convicted. A pardon means you're set free. What does it mean to have your sentence commuted?
Thrown out?
What's that?
Thrown out?
No, not quite.
Reduced to some other.
That's right, reduced to some other kind of sentence. So many of those, instead of getting executed, got prison sentences. Why didn't Lincoln commute them all? In a way, that was actually what he wanted to do.
did the 39 do something different?
Well, he did think that there were the strongest cases against them, that that there was really strong evidence that they had murdered people. But even so, I mean, what did he think would happen if he had pardoned them all, commuted them all?
Americans wouldn't like it.
That's right. But the public would go nuts. And it would hurt Lincoln's popularity terribly, already hurting in the war. So then, 38 of them were executed together at the end of 1862. The largest mass execution in all of American history. One of them had died already, which is why it's actually 39 who were executed. 38. The Santee Sioux leaders were tracked down and killed, including Little Crow, who was killed by the military. So what does all this suggest about the rights that Indians had once they're under the control of the government?
Was taken away.
What's that, Mike?
Was taken away by the military.
Well, but I mean in general. So what does this suggest about the rights Indians have on other reservations is what I mean. That's right. Even though they're under the control of the government now, the government is acting like they're still outside their control, as a pretext to not treat them with the rights that belong to everybody.